The demon that carves my skin every night isn't evil, it's terrified. The first letter they carved into me took 7 weeks. I know because I counted every fucking scratch. Every night, between 3:00 and 3:03 a.m., it would come for me. Pin me to my mattress, steal the air from my lungs, and get to work with whatever passed for its fingernails. When it was done, a new red line would have joined the others on my left shoulder. A fresh little tally mark in hell. Which is how I ended up here, on the eve of my 17th birthday, in a place called the Seraphim Sleep Institute. It's a fancy name for a fancy tomb. The place is a literal mansion, the kind of place you see in old movies right before everyone starts dying. My mom scraped together the last of her savings for this, for Dr. Alistair Finch, the supposed miracle worker. My last hope. The thought makes my stomach clench. His office was worse than the rest of the house. It looked like a Victorian parlor threw up. Bookshelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound spines. Clocks ticked from every surface, their hands marching in a dozen different rhythms. It was supposed to feel grand, I guess. It just felt heavy, watched. A cold spot had already formed around my chair, a familiar personal winter that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the same cold that came every night at 3. It felt like morgue air seeping into my jeans, making the teeth in my head ache. I couldn't let it get to my eyes. Once my vision started to frost over at the edges, I knew I was losing. That's when I'd see it. The trigger. The thing from my nightmares. A mirror. It was an antique, all dark wood and tarnished silver, hanging by a bookshelf. It wasn't the one from my room, of course. It didn't have the black vines strangling the frame or the spider web of cracks obscuring the glass. But it was close enough. The cold deepened. My spine went rigid. I had one earbud in, the cord snaking from the pocket of my hoodie. The tinny blast of some forgotten punk band was the only thing keeping the silence from swallowing me whole. Dr. Finch hadn't said a word in 5 minutes. He just sat there in his wingback chair reading my file. His eyes, a pale, watery blue, scanned the pages. He stroked his neat graying beard. He was the picture of calm, and it pissed me off. How could he be so calm while reading about what was happening to me? My mom said he was the best somnologist on the East Coast. If he couldn't fix me, no one could. The guilt of what this was costing her felt like a separate weight pressing down on me, fighting the cold for dominance. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to just let go, let it finish whatever it was doing. No, fuck that. Happy thoughts, Socia. Think about something else. Anything else. I didn't have to. Dr. Finch cleared his throat, the sound like a stone dropping into a deep well. I flinched. Zozha Volkov? He asked. His voice was soft, measured. Yeah, I mumbled, pulling the earbud out. The room's ticking clocks rushed in to fill the void. That's me. The name felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who slept through the night. 17 tomorrow, I see, he said, a small, polite smile not quite reaching his eyes. He closed the thick file. Any plans for the big day? I wanted to say yeah, hoping not to get partially flayed in my sleep. Totally, I lied, the words tasting like ash. Pancakes. My friends are throwing me a surprise party, which I obviously know nothing about. I'm gonna have to act all surprised. You know how it is. His smile tightened a fraction. Of course. Well, in that case, a very happy birthday from all of us here. Feel free to take a mint from the bowl at the front desk on your way out. Right. Thanks. I stared at a spot on the Persian rug, a faded stain that looked vaguely like a screaming face. Dr. Finch steepled his fingers. So, shall we begin? Your file mentions sleep paralysis. You could call it that, I said, picking at a loose thread on my jeans. It's like being buried alive while you're still awake. Can't move, can't scream. You get the picture. And you experience hallucinations? I see things I shouldn't, I said, the defensiveness rising in my throat like bile. Look, I know what you're gonna say. It's a manifestation of trauma, a grief construct. I get it. My dad's gone. I know he's not coming back. But this isn't about him. This is something else. something that leaves marks. He just watched me, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched. I felt the old, familiar panic setting in. This is where they usually start talking about prescriptions. This is where they pat your hand and tell you you're a strong young woman. I half expected him to pull out a referral for a shrink. I shoved my hands in my hoodie pockets, my knuckles white. Just get it over with. You know, Ms. Volkov, he said finally, and my stomach dropped. I've learned one thing in my years, both as a doctor and as a father. He nodded toward a silver frame on his desk. My eyes darted to it. A girl, maybe 10 years old, with his same pale eyes and a curtain of dark hair. She wasn't smiling. She was standing in a field of dead sunflowers, staring right at the camera with an expression that was far too old for her face. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold in the room traced its way down my spine. Parenthood teaches you that the neat diagnoses in textbooks rarely fit the messy reality of a human life, he continued, his gaze still on the photograph. My patients come here because they need more than a label for their suffering. They need to be understood. Medication is a tool, but the solution, he tapped his temple, is almost always found by looking at the whole picture. So yes, Ms. Volkov, I believe you. In this office, I have to. The air left my lungs in a rush. I stared at him, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't humoring me. I've seen that look 100 times. This was different. There was a weariness in his eyes, a deep-seated sadness that felt knowing. Wait, I said, my voice cracking. You're serious? Like, for real serious? I can't very well help a patient I don't believe, can I? A breath shuddered out of me. Okay, wow, thanks, that's a first. A real smile, small and sad, touched his lips. My pleasure. Now you said the episodes are precise. Always, I said, leaning forward. He was listening. He was actually fucking listening. 3 double to 3:03 a.m. Not when I'm falling asleep, not when I'm waking up. Right in the middle of the night. Highly irregular, he murmured, making a note on a pen. Sleep paralysis is a phenomenon of thresholds, of transitions between states. It shouldn't operate on a timetable. And these injuries, he looked up from his notes, his pale eyes pinning me in place. The ones on your shoulder. Your file says previous doctors were unable to explain them. May I? The tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the corner suddenly sounded like a hammer against an anvil. One beat. The cold flared, and for a second the room flickered. The mirror across the room wasn't reflecting the office anymore. It was showing my bedroom, dark and silent. And in the glass, a shape was moving. A funhouse version of me. My face, but the bones were wrong. My hair, but it was patchy and wet-looking. My mouth stretched into a grin that was too wide, showing too many teeth. It raised a hand, and its fingers were too long, ending in dirty, broken nails. Ms. Volkov? Zosia? I snapped back. I was in the office. Dr. Finch was looking at me, his brow furrowed with concern. Sorry, I croaked, my throat dry. Zoned out. What did you say? The injuries, he repeated gently. I'd like to see them, if you're comfortable. Right, the injuries. My hand went to my left shoulder. This was the real test. He could say he believed me, but this was different. This was physical proof that something was very, very wrong. The other doctors saw the scars, and their minds snapped shut. Self-harm, they'd called it. A cry for attention. You don't have to, he said, reading my hesitation. This is entirely on your terms. But it would be helpful. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. It's fine. You should see. I stood up, my legs shaky, and pulled my hoodie off, tossing it onto a chaise lounge. I turned my back to him slightly and rolled up the sleeve of my t-shirt. The skin was a ruin. A crisscrossing road map of faded white lines and newer, angrier red ones. They weren't random. They were deliberate. Shaped. There was a click and a bright light made me squeeze my eyes shut. My apologies, Dr. Finch muttered. I heard him adjusting an examination lamp. When the light steadied, I kept my eyes fixed on the floor. Can you see them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. One moment. I felt him move closer. I could hear the soft sound of his breathing. "My God," he whispered. "The patterns. They're not just scars, are they? They're cuneiform. Glyphs." "Letters," I corrected him, my voice flat. "It's spelling something." "And the thing you see?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "The one from the mirror. Did it do this?" Another flash. The warped face in the glass, its eyes wide with a frantic, animal terror that mirrored my own. The smell of sulfur and wet soil filled my head. "I call it my reflection," I said, the words coming out automatically, the way I'd practiced them. At first it was just a nightmare. It would stand on the other side of the mirror and just stare. Then it started to reach through. I'd feel this sharp, burning cold, and then I'd wake up. But I'd wake up for real. At my alarm, in the morning. That's how it started. "And then?" he prompted, his voice still a hush. "Then it started leaving these," I said, my teeth chattering now. The cold in the room was absolute. I could feel ice crystals forming on my eyelashes. Little scratches at first. They'd show up a few hours after I woke up and be mostly gone by the next day. It took 7 weeks to finish the first letter, an H, then an E 3 months after that, then an L. This was it. This was the moment he'd call it off. Tell me I needed a different kind of doctor. He had to. This was insane. But he just stayed silent. I heard him take a slow, shaky breath. "These letters," Dr. Finch said, his voice strained, almost unrecognizable. "They spell." I finally turned to look at him. His face was the color of chalk. The clinical detachment was gone, replaced by a raw, naked horror I knew was not for my benefit. It was real. He looked at the scars on my shoulder, then at me, and his watery blue eyes were filled with a terrible, chilling recognition. He gave a weak, broken nod. Help. He already knew. He knew what this was, and he looked just as scared as I am.